to make. All right, leaving it alone. Here we go. All right. So with that, 5 people expressed concerns that additional long-range hunting equipment restrictions would reduce hunters' ability to make humane, ethical shots. 5 people expressed support for the continued use of rangefinders. 5 people expressed a desire to see restrictions on long-range hunting optics, and 5 people expressed a general desire to restrict long-range hunting. 6 people expressed a desire for additional motorized vehicle restrictions, including e-bikes. 4 people expressed concerns that additional restrictions would disproportionately impact disabled hunters. 3 people requested additional primitive weapon hunts in both traditional archery and muzzleloaders, and 3 people explicitly stated their support for long-range hunting optics. Though only mentioned once or twice, additional comments included concerns related to future restrictions, impact on local businesses and economy, the potential loss of fish and game revenue through tags, difficulty in changing unethical sportsmen into ethical sportsmen regardless of weapon technology and restrictions, increasing fishing games, educational outreach to encourage ethical hunting, updating short-range weapon hunts, and only making recommendations to restrict hunting technology if there is data to support increased hunter harvest success. We also received a good number of comments that were not germane to the charter of the HAT working group. So those comments included things like adjusting season length and timing, reducing the number of hunters afield, predator management, antler point restrictions, increasing tag prices, and concerns with the HAT working group structure and or membership. Again, those comments are not germane to the charter of the group, so I did not go into great detail, but they were comments received nonetheless. And for the public, I just wanted to emphasize to please submit your comments through the online public feedback form on the HAT webpage on the Fish and Game website. That is the best way for you to get your comments to every single member of this group. So please use that forum. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Wendy, unless you want me just to proceed with introducing our next speakers. You're muted, ma'am.
That would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, let me get my agenda here. So first up, we have a 15-minute presentation from Abram Summerfield, who is the principal electro-optical engineer for EOTech. He is a Idahoan and formerly worked for Night Force, which is based out of Idaho. So Abram, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Hello there. All right, can you guys see my screen there?
Not yet.
It's loading.
It's coming, yeah. There we go.
All right. So as you said, my name is Abram Summerfield, principal electro-optical engineer for EOTech. I'm a former R&D electro-optics lead engineer for Night Force. Been in the industry for about 10 years in modern and advanced electro-optics. Lifelong resident of Clearwater County and avid hunter, archery, rifle, muzzleloader, shotgun, deer, elk, turkey, bear, you name it. And this presentation is solely my own opinion, not affiliated with either company listed. All right, so my experience is in traditional day optics, so rifle scope, spotting scopes, binoculars, rangefinders, digital night vision, thermal imaging, rangefinders and also aim lasers, and military range days and night shoots. And long range shooting has been part of that. So I wanted to go over some key characteristics of different optical systems, modern optics, and thermal and night vision. So I want to start here with spotting scopes, just to kind of show some comparisons on what you can expect from the current state-of-the-art optics. So you can see a ridgeline here on the left near my house. I took some pictures with a Night Force TS82 20 to 60x spotter. So got some turkeys up there on the hill. You can see a zoomed in picture on there on the right. At 400 yards, you can clearly see beard. You could see spurs if a turkey had them. Just the detail you can see with the modern spotting scopes is incredible. So I took a pulsar thermal on the same flock of turkeys and captured some photography there. So you can see on that left image, the turkeys are visible, mostly their heads, which are the hottest part of the turkey, because the rest of them are insulated by their feathers. So you can see the whites of their heads. And if we look on the right view, the turkeys in the trees at 400 yards, you absolutely cannot tell what they are, but there is a definite heat signature there. Tell you that something is hot in the timber. And this was a 3.5 to 14 pulsar unit, and this is running their 12 micron bolometer, which is basically the highest and best microbolometer in any of these commercial grade thermals. So then I did some more night vision shoots. So top left, you can see a dirt pile with a gate that was just taken with my cell phone in the daylight. When it got dark, a deer wandered in there, and I was able to capture that with my cell phone with a flash. Clearly see there's a deer standing there. And then on the right is a night vision view of the same deer in the same place, same time. And that was taken with a set of EOTech Bino NV night vision, which are Gen 4 white phos night vision. They're state-of-the-art $15,000 setup there. So that's just kind of a comparison of what you can see with the different technologies. So I want to get briefly into the science of light and what the light is that we can see and night vision can see and a thermal can see. So all light is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which includes everything from the visible light we see through microwaves, gamma rays, X-rays. It's all part of the same spectrum. So we're going to focus on visible through infrared here. So if we look up at the colors, we see the pink, purples, and the blue. So 400 to 700 nanometers is the visible light that we can see. That defines our full red, green, blue color palette that we can see with our eyes, spotting scopes, binoculars, rifle scopes. As we shift farther into the deep reds, which is called near infrared, that's where night vision, that's what it can see. So from about 500 nanometers, which is an orangey red, through 1100, which our eyes can't perceive, they just see as black, but it is a deep red in the graph here. That's what night vision can see, called the near IR band. Moving even farther beyond that is called the long wave infrared. So that's a traditional thermal, as we all think of it, rifle scope, monocular, thermal binoculars. They see long wave infrared, which is 8,000 to 14,000 nanometers. It's quite a ways down the line, and that is primarily heat signatures. It's not so much the heat itself, but rather the light emitted from it. So if you think of your stove burner electric element, you turn it on high, it glows bright red. As you turn it off, it starts cooling and turns into a shade of black, where we can't see it anymore. But a thermal still can pick up the light that's coming off of it because it's in that higher wavelength band. So that's how it works. So I want to go into some resolution limits and common factors between those techs. So traditional optics far outperform thermal and night vision for accurately identifying animals. The resolution limit for all optics are defined by the wavelength of light they see. Visible wavelengths have much higher resolution than infrared, and they can provide much more detail. All of these wavelengths are blocked by trees, grass, leaves, and dense fog. So again, we looked at 3 pictures here. Traditional optics clearly see the detail of the deer, their eyes, the hooves, the different hair colors. Thermal get the general shape, but we lose all definition. And that's because the wavelength of a thermal is such that you can't capture the photons. They can't be imaged as well. It's just a physics of the light behind it that you cannot get the same resolution out of a thermal. And the same applies for night vision. Night vision is super grainy. It does have a little bit better definition than thermal, as far as you can see the white tail of the deer and the different coloration, but not great, especially when all these deer are less than 50 yards away. So some more examples and limitations. So night vision, it's black and white. It makes it really hard to see stationary items. It's only useful in the dark. If you're hiking into a spot, out of a spot, they're completely of no benefit in the day. They need some amount of light to work. If it's pitch black, you're in the dark timber with no moon, no stars, they don't work at all. Can't see anything. And the images do get very grainy in dark conditions, as you saw in that last picture. And the other thing, night vision is best for close range. It really falls apart at extended distances. So thermal, again, it's a black and white image. Your display and software can add false color, but it's only based on the temperature of the target. You can't tell a black bear from a brown bear or an albino deer from a normal deer. It's all just based on temperature. The optical resolution is very poor due to physical limitations with the wavelength, making it effectively, you're not able to identify an animal beyond 100 or 200 yards, even with the best military grade products. You could not tell a mature doe from a calf elk at 200 yards. Can also easily be overwhelmed by warm objects such as rocks, stumps, sunny spots, anything like that. They're really the best in cold conditions without overhead sun. So I want to get into my opinions on this. So fair chase and arguably unfair practices. So binoculars and spotting scopes extend the range that hunters can identify animals well beyond 1,000 yards, far beyond a range that any animal on the other side would be able to identify the hunter. Google Earth and satellite mapping, topo lines, lets you identify key geography, saddles, ponds, clearing, deciduous trees. Without those maps, boots on the ground is the only way you'd ever be able to gain that knowledge. Trail cameras, you get 24/7 monitoring of game, you can pattern them, you can be in multiple places at once. That you could argue that that's unfair. All of these items are widely accepted as standard hunting practices by most sportsmen in Idaho, myself included. I'm totally okay with them and think that they all have a place in our hunting culture. So my stance on this, current regulations prohibit the use of any electronic device attached to or incorporated in the firearm or scope. This ensures that hunters must visibly locate and see their target before shooting. I support this regulation and the verbiage around it, and I don't support imposing any additional limitations beyond that. The use of night vision and thermal devices is only an aid in spotting, including retrieval of dead game after dark. They're of the same benefit as a spotting scope or binoculars and should be categorized as such, remaining legal to use as long as they are not weapon mounted. So handheld thermals, handheld night vision, I think we should maintain their legality per the current regulations. Hunting's very individualistic. Everybody derives their enjoyment through their own merits, their own methods. I don't see any reason to ban techniques that some people find enjoyable and ethical, so long as they're not harming anyone else or causing irreparable harm to the species. We don't need any more governance or regulation of our hunting rights. Rather, we should allow each hunter to define what fair chase means to them. further justification, hunters who like to compete, they want to enter their trophy in Boone and Crockett or Pope and Young record books, have to abide by the rules of those clubs. Those clubs have guidelines on what optics and methods are allowed. Took a snippet there. Every bow hunter, when submitting a bow harvest animal for possible acceptance into the records, must sign a fair chase affidavit attesting to the fact that the animal was taken legally and ethically in adherence to all control and game laws, as well as the club's defined rules of fair chase. Hunters who don't wish to compete, don't want to post their trophy everywhere, they're simply enjoying the sport for their own personal satisfaction, they should be able to decide for themselves how they want to define that experience. Modern optics are following the natural progression of the technology, much the same as rifles and archery equipment over the past 100 years. Majority of hunters find modern optics a necessity for their method of hunting. Those who find the technology unethical are free to hunt as they please, be that with a recurve, open-sighted 30-30, muzzleloader, or spend all the money they can and get the most modern tactical rifle with the best optics money could buy. That's the end of my presentation there. Some of my sources are listed. I have a couple minutes left. I just wanted to touch on a few other things. Trail cameras are a big one. I know there's been debate back and forth on those. I personally lump them into the same category as spotting devices. They don't let you harvest. They aren't there when you shoot. So really all they do is let you see more game. So I am supportive of trail cameras, and I think that they're a great addition. I know some other states have banned them, and there's ways to get around the regulations. So I wouldn't like to see that happen at all. The one area that I think could deserve a little bit more attention is road hunting, specifically use of side-by-sides. I know that's a difficult problem to address, but perhaps thoughts on using or requiring unloaded rifles, putting no ammunition in magazine, may be an attempt to stop that. But in my opinion, the guys cruising nonstop 24/7 and never even stop to glass, that's more unfair than any advances in optics technology.
Well, thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you so much. And we will provide copies of the slides to the members so you can use those links that he had on his last slide. Over to you, Valerie.
Perfect, Wendy. Thank you very much, Abram. Please stick around after we get through all the presenters. We'll open it up for questions. So please do stick around. Next, we have John Zinnel, who is the Director of Community Relations at the Kinetic Group, formerly Vista. So John, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Yeah, hi everybody. Hope everybody can hear me all right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Perfect. And do we have the presentation up, Eller? Okay, we got a thumbs up. That's perfect. All right, here we are. We all know what day it is. It's Veterans Day. So thank all the veterans near and far for sure. A little bit about myself, John Zinnel, Director of Community Relations, the Kinetic Group, which is probably a new name for many of you that have not seen this yet, but essentially federal ammunition, CCI, Spear ammunition, heavy shot ammunition, and Remington ammunition. Our business unit or business name is the Kinetic Group. So I manage all of our community relations, conservation, and youth shooting sports for the company. So I get to interact with a lot of state wildlife agencies across the country when it comes to our products and working through regulations and other various things when it comes to new products. So my office is out of our headquarters at the Federal Ammunition Plant in Anoka, Minnesota. But for those of you in Idaho, we have CCI and Spear there in Lewiston, Idaho. So we do have about 1,000 or more employees there in Idaho and lots of very passionate folks building ammunition. So here's a list. We do manufacture in 4 different states. Like I said, Anoka, Minnesota, Lewiston, Lone Oak, Arkansas is where Remington Ammunition is. We also have Sweet Home, Oregon for heavy shot ammunition. Overall, we have about 4,000 employees operating 24/7. Every type of ammunition, as well as components, primers, bullets, everything is all done within our factories. So combined, we are loading millions of rounds of ammunition per day. And combined, we are the world's largest ammunition manufacturer. So we do ammunition for not only the general consumer market for hunting and target shooting, but we also have many military contracts and so forth within the law enforcement community. So our mission, and I always start every presentation off to just discuss where we are, is to build better ammunition in America, to create community, power defense, and to conserve our heritage. So it fits in very, very well when we start talking about wildlife agencies, and specifically for this particular meeting and technology and innovation. So I mentioned this, the robust military and LE contracting programs, in a lot of ways. And I think when you can start talking about technology and understanding innovation within our marketplace, you can take this innovation conversation and put it in almost any industry that you could think of, whether it be the automotive industry, whether it be technology industry with cell phones and computers and everything else. There's always a continue for innovation for various reasons, which I'll hit on a few of them, I guess, here in a slide or two. But I bring up the robust military and law enforcement side because we obviously want to have our military and all of our allies using the best products that are out there. So we have design teams and engineers that are set up specifically for making sure that we are providing the best ammunition that's out there for these particular fashions. And so along with that, the technology that we learn while we're building and working through those processes, a lot of times then gets transferred into various products as we're developing and building them, whether it be for target shooting or for hunting purposes. So innovation drives growth. I think we all know that. Everybody here has done their due diligence and research to understand why exactly we're here. And I think a lot of it comes down to working with a state wildlife agency, whether it be in Idaho or any other state, to make sure that regulations are clear and concise and are understood by everybody, all their constituents, whether you're a resident or a non-resident hunter, to make sure that there's enforceability in the field for the law enforcement officers there with the game and fish, as well as making sure, I don't know of anybody that wants to go out and hunt and partake in the long traditions of our country and others of hunting and of being a field and doesn't want to do it ethically. And so everybody wants to make sure they're doing that. But with that comes innovation and a challenge to a state agency to keep up with those innovations and make sure that their statutory language is up to date when it comes to that. And so, obviously reasons for innovation when it comes to industry is to, create new markets, diversifying revenue streams. When you look at a company of our size that is loading everything from turkey hunting ammunition to upland hunting to waterfowl to centerfire rifle pistol for hunting and target shooting and everything in between, it definitely works good to diversify those streams in various marketplaces, assisting and balancing your risks, as well as staying competitive in the marketplace. And I think that's where you see a lot of the innovation drive when it comes to our particular industry, is seeking what's next, what's new, right? I mean, I was talking to a friend today on the phone, and I think he was saying that it's iPhone 16 now, and I could be even off by that. It might even be more than that. But to think that there's a new phone every single year, but yet a phone from 3 years ago works just fine. Everybody strives because they want to have what is the newest, what is the greatest, what is the best. And in some cases, they may have that phone, but have not the slightest clue nor desire to use everything that's in that phone. But they have that just in case they would like to have it or to use it. I wanted to provide a few individual examples of our company and our process essentially with working with state wildlife agencies with innovation. So we're truly driven by innovation. We always want to try and make sure we're putting and developing the best products in the space for our consumers. And so one project that I worked a lot on when I first started with the company, I've been there for 8 years now, is our first time in a large scale loading tungsten super shot. For anybody that's familiar with wild turkeys, you kind of have seen the TSS take that world by storm. And we worked a lot with state wildlife agencies to better clarify their language when it comes to turkey hunting. And so I think when I started, there was still 16 to 18 states that restricted the use of something like a tungsten super shot because the shot size itself was so small comparative to what was normally or traditionally used for hunting turkeys when the technology of this tungsten super shot was not there. As well as many states that had restrictions, and some currently still do, restrictions on use of different sub-gauge shotguns, many of which were listed as 20 gauge or larger, which then restricts the use of any of the 16s, 28s, or 410s, which certainly have the ability to ethically harvest using the tungsten super shot. So we worked with those state agencies, partially because we wanted, of course, this product that was very, very common and the excitement within the consumer market to be used, and those folks to make sure they understood the regulations, but also to be a good partner with wildlife agencies and make sure that they maybe knew that their regulations needed to be updated from when they were first written, and lead ammunition was the primary source. So we worked very closely. We did a lot of shoot demonstrations to discuss and to show, the trajectory of shot because of its density, and being able to carry further and so forth. And since then, now tungsten and blended tungsten has become common in a lot of waterfowl and upland loads. And so because of its density, it's very, very common and good use for ethical harvest of birds. Federal Fire Stick, which is a new muzzleloader ignition system, is another product that we are continually working with. When we first started with that, it's a revolutionary igniting system. You can see there on the photos. It's a capsule that has your powder, and you load your projectile like you would anything else with your ramrod through the muzzle of the muzzleloader, and then you charge at the breech using this capsule of powder. So what that does is that capsule is a waterproof opportunity for your powder. Anybody that muzzleloader hunts knows some of the challenges with hang fires and no fires and issues that can come with that. It's a product that really came about to increase safety in the field and to try to take some of the challenges of those that are wanting to muzzleloader hunt because of the season dates or additional opportunities to do so in a safe manner without worrying about or concerns of having hang fires and those such things. The other one is our Federal Terminal Ascent centerfire rifle bullet. Something that's very high quality bonded bullet that performs at a wide range of distances. And so we had heard of and knew, and everybody does have examples of folks that are very, very good target shooters, right? And we're using their centerfire rifles for target shooting, very, very accurate pieces of equipment. And in doing so, then thought that they could then take that exact same setup and use it for hunting at whatever various distances it may be. The problem is most of those target bullets are not designed to ethically harvest those species that they were chasing. And so this bonded bullet performs at a very wide range of distances. I had a friend of mine, daughter, shot her first mule deer just over the weekend at under 100 yards and sent me an upset of her 6.5 Creedmoor. And it did absolutely everything it needed to do, but also knowing that her mother shot her first mule deer with me 2 years prior using that same bullet, and she was several hundred yards of distance, and that bullet did everything that it needed to do. Same rifle, same setup, same bullet, under 100 and something that's versus over several hundred. The next one being, and it's probably not as relevant for Idaho, but as an example of the straight-walled cartridges for anybody that's hunted in the central U.S. and southern U.S., mostly upper Midwest, has a lot of slug hunts with shotgun slugs, and the change with a lot of state regulations moving into a straight-walled cartridge. Remington launched a 360 buckhammer straight-walled, which provides you a very, very good variety, a good level of velocity, as well as a better drop scenario when it comes to what your products can do comparative to other cartridges. So just a quick overview. I'm sure everybody on this call understands and knows the funding structures within our country for wildlife conservation and the Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Conservation Trust Fund. This federal excise tax, right? All firearms, ammunition have that tax on there. And I know you're going to hear from some others tonight that are going to probably talk and touch a little bit about this. Archery tackle is also included. And over the past years, our company alone is well over $400 million in this excise tax. So we're the largest contributor to this. And that does not just include hunting ammunition. That is also target ammunition, which is a higher number, a higher dollar comparative to hunting ammunition. When you start looking at round to round, target shooters are certainly funding conservation across this country. So this tax is a very, very large part of what funds almost all state wildlife agencies across our country. So the more hunters, the more shooters, the more ammunition and equipment that is sold increases the amount of dollars that are put down at wildlife conservation. I put this slide on there. I'm certain that all of you have seen, or if you haven't, I certainly encourage you to look up the North American model of wildlife conservation. It is truly the most successful system of policies and laws that truly do, like this says, safeguard fish and wildlife and their habitats. And a lot of it, is coming down to managing by science. Allocating wildlife is by the law and working with state wildlife agencies. But when we start talking about the technology side of things, opportunity for all, and the public trust, a lot of these tenets of the North American model can come into conversation. And so hopefully, probably not on here because I'm doing a very quick overview, but during some other subcommittees or other conversations, I certainly would encourage you to look back at the North American model. The other one, I pulled this off the AFWA website, which is the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And it's a mission of what state wildlife agencies are. And so I can leave that up there to kind of give you a little bit of an insight of what exactly does a state wildlife agency do. And I think that there's a challenge in educating our general consumers. I say consumers, you guys would probably say licensed buyers, licensed purchasers. They go hand in hand, just different terminology from industry to agency. And so I'll just pass through there. I did pull a few things to directly correlate to when we start talking about industry innovation. I am a professional member of the Boone and Crockett Club for over a year now. Very great organization that has pulled together some wonderful resources and provided some stances in several different things, whether it's long range hunting, or this one I pulled a few different items from the tech and hunting and condensed them down. And so a lot of the objectives would be to provide hunters the best available options to promote an ethical harvest of wild game, reducing wounding of lost animals, increasing wildlife recovery and reducing meat spoilage, increasing human safety. And then, of course, everybody wants to increase participation among newcomers, elderly, and others to make sure that everybody has a chance to be inclusive into the hunting space. A couple quick slides. I know I'm probably running on my 15 minutes, but what we're doing as an industry on our websites is I pulled a bunch of these snippets off of there, and we're trying to educate not only our consumers, but also our dealers. So that way our dealers can work with consumers that are purchasing this ammunition to truly understand the difference between what is target versus hunting versus personal defense. For example, in the handgun space, we have why FMJs belong only at the range, and the definition and understanding of all the various bullets. We do very similar things when it comes to rifle, sighting in the rifle and how important it is to understand the trajectories, as well as, again, target hunting, personal defense, to share the difference, because each of these bullets is going to perform differently. And we want to make sure that our end users, your licensed buyers, understand what happens and what should be used in the field. Shotgun, very similar. We have different shot sizes and shot densities for different materials that are used, whether it's tungsten or bismuth or lead shot, steel shot, and so forth. So again, that's a very quick overview. I know I didn't get to go into a whole ton of details, but I know with as many people that we have on the call, we could certainly, I'm sure, talk shop on various calibers and issues and preferences. But I do look forward to answering any questions that anybody may have as the presentations go on tonight.
Thank you, John. Over to you, Ellery.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you very much, John. I very much appreciate you presenting to the group today, knowing that you're a little bit ahead of us time zone wise. So appreciate you sitting in with
Yeah,
us.
staying late with
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
You bet.
Awesome. Next up, we have Nephi Cole, who is the Director of Government Relations, State Affairs for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Nephi, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me get my presentation up and make sure it works. Are you guys seeing my presentation?
No.
Not
Okay.
yet. Give it a sec.
Still no?
Nope. Try it again, sir.
That's okay. We're gonna fix this. It'll take me, let's try it. Let's try this.
Oh, it's looking good. I see you. It's not your presentation, but I see your, there you go. Yay, got it. Although
All right.
you're showing the presentation mode, your zone mode rather than the slide mode.
See. I'm gonna try one more time and then we're just gonna run with whatever comes up.
Okay.
How's that?
That's great.
Hey, everybody, thank you very much for your patience. I apologize. I'm Nephi Cole. I'm the Director of Government Relations and State Affairs for the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is the Firearms Trade Association of America. We represent the 9,000 manufacturers, distributors, sales points of firearms, ammunition, optics, components. Most people know us from our show. It's called SHOT Show, the Shooting Hunting Outdoor Trade Show. I've also worked in natural resources for most of my career, including as a natural resource policy advisor for the former governor of Wyoming, Matthew H. Mead, for 7 years. And then I do a natural resources-based podcast called the Your Mountain Podcast that you should all listen to and give 5 stars. So a little bit about technology and hunting regulation. So just to give you guys some things to think about. I know you've had some discussions about this already, and I don't pretend to know all those, but I do want to touch on some background. So I think the first and most important question that you need to broach and you want to talk about is, why do you hunt? Why do you hunt? That's a conversation for each of you to have. It's not necessarily a conversation for the agency to have, but for you guys, what is hunting? The act of pursuing game or wild animals for food or sport. And that's Merriam-Webster that defined it that way. And there are millions of years, literally, of human history in hunting and why we hunt. Well, there's a historical necessity. So, of course, this is something that is deeply part of who we are as people. There's a cultural significance to hunting. And depending on where you are in the world, that may be different. There are some locations where there's an expectation that everyone needed to be able to contribute in this way. There are other cultures in the world where hunting was reserved for only a few. And that continues to be the case today. You know, there are locations where you have to pass tests, where you have to have a certain amount of money to hunt, where it is definitely an elitist opportunity. And that tends towards those locations where it's seen as a sport rather than as a necessity. Well, there's wildlife management. Of course, with the North American model, we know that the reason that we hunt here, a huge part of it is because hunting is the management tool that our agencies use to be able to manage numbers of species in balance with their available habitat. So it's an extremely important tool, and that cannot be lost on us because of the statutory responsibility of this agency. And then, of course, there's naturalism. Many of us, this is how we enjoy the great outdoors, being part of the circle of life, part of the food chain. It's important to talk about who owns wildlife, why it's different in the United States of America. In the English perspective, who owned the wildlife? Well, it was the king. It was the nobles. It was the landowner. That's who the wildlife belonged to. Well, that's different. When America was established, when this country in 1776 became what it is, those wildlife that belonged to the king no longer belonged to the king. They belonged to the people. This is called the public trust doctrine. It was really well established in the 1842 case called Martin versus Waddell. And that public trust doctrine is essentially this: those wildlife belong to all of us. They don't belong to just you because it's your land. They don't belong to the guy who's in charge. They belong to a kid in Chicago just as much as they belong to me, who has a family history of hunting for years and years. Idaho Title 36 defines this for you guys in your state law. The property of the state, only captured or taken under conditions, means, and in such manner as will preserve, protect, and perpetuate, and provide for the citizens of the state, and as law permitted to others. And that's important, and we won't get into the details of why, but that means other state citizens as well. To others, and continued supplies of such wildlife for hunting, fishing, and trapping. So that's your state statute. That is your agency's charge. That's important. Remember, if you're advocating regulations that are beyond this charge, that's outside of the agency's lane. So what is the commission in charge of? Preserve, protect, perpetuate, manage, and provide the citizens the opportunity to hunt, fish, and trap. In state law, it says specifically, because conditions are changing, and this is in Idaho, the methods and means of administering and carrying out the state's policy must be flexible. So remember that. Hunting for sport or hunting for food? Well, which is yours? Which do you choose to do? Historically, those who hunted for food stressed efficacy in the take. What does that mean? That means they wanted it to be efficient and effective. There are many of us that still do that. Their goal when they go out there is to fill the freezer. There are those now, and this is becoming much more common, who view hunting as primarily sport. Those folks tend to favor limiting their means. And those are personal reasons that lead them to do that. It's not about efficacy. They're not, it's not about, yes, they'd like to fill the freezer, but in general, those folks are out there trying to prove something to themselves. That's a personal decision. That is a voyage that they are on. So this is a question for you. Should state policy favor one of these over the other? The important individual question, again, will always come back to you individually. Why do you hunt? So this is a little quadrant to show you kind of how these things coincide with each other. On one axis, we have the efficacy of take. On the other axis, we have personal challenge. If you think about this, there are different seasons, there are different choices of take that an individual might choose. High challenge, high efficacy, low challenge. Most people start in the upper left-hand quadrant. They want high efficacy. They want to be able to take an animal. They want to be able to put it in the freezer, and they don't want it to be, months in the field trying to do that. That's where most people start. By the end of someone's hunting journey, many times they end up in the high challenge, low efficiency area. But someone choosing to be in the bottom right-hand quadrant does not mean that the agency necessarily should manage for them. Just as someone in the top left quadrant shouldn't say, well, everybody has to be just like me. The agency has to perform a balancing act, and that balancing act is to preserve, protect, perpetuate, and manage, but provide opportunities for the citizens to hunt. That's all citizens. That's whoever decides they want to do it. That isn't a guy who has a flannel shirt just like me and he gets preference. It's everybody. The agency does not have a role in determining the why of you, the individual hunter. That is beyond their scope. And we should not be, and you should not be, driving the agency to manage hunting just for you. Because the conditions are changing, the methods and means of administering and carrying out the state's policy must be flexible. So as hunters, what does that mean? Well, this is a lifelong journey. So what should we be improving? Efficacy. The surprise should be if you miss, not when you hit. So when you look at technology, think about that. Too often, people are looking at numbers and they are talking about like, well, we should make it harder, or, all these different things. Technology is helping us do what we should for the best of the animal, which is when you pull the trigger, it shouldn't be a surprise that you got it. It should be shocking if you didn't. We should use tools that ensure humane kills. Your chance is someone else's loss. If you take a shot with a weapon that wasn't capable, or from a distance that you're not capable, and wound an animal and it is lost, there aren't a whole lot of people, or maybe not enough, who would eat that tag. Instead, they'd still try and fill the freezer. Anything that aids, and this is technology related, in wounded and dead recovery should be embraced by everyone. And many new technologies fall into this category. And then let's talk about skill. We should all embrace a lifelong journey of improvement. I always say we should be capable of an ethical shot placement and energy, and know our limits. We should be able to stalk within 10 yards. That's what we should be learning throughout our hunting journey, our entire lives. Be able to stalk as close as possible. But the same hunter, if he neglects buying the rifle that can make the accurate shot, that's a mistake. We should also be able to shoot to 1,000 and wise enough to find the distance between the two where an ethical shot can be made. And that scale changes based on who you are over your lifetime. You can't just put a number on it. If you do, you're going to freeze your regulations where they fit you personally today, but they're not going to work for the future. So what is the agency's role? Here's some do's for the agency. Agencies should be planning and doing their work on technology using these tools. Analyze your harvest data. Set seasons. Allocate opportunities. Be careful. Just because one hunter values a greater challenge, that doesn't mean that they should dictate equity of result. What do I mean by that? That means if I want to shoot something with a compound bow, I shouldn't be looking at numbers and saying, well, my hunting is harder, so therefore I'm less likely to get it. So therefore I should make everybody else's hunt hard like mine. Just because you want to choose something harder doesn't mean you should make it harder for the rest of the world. That's not the goal of the agency. That's not the goal of wildlife management. That's a personal journey for you. We should ensure ethical take. Is the tool capable? Is the tool an improvement? If the answers to those things are yes, that tool should be legal. Agencies need to stay up to speed on the technology of the take. There is an appropriate place for technology. Agencies need to find it. And I hope I didn't skip. I think I did skip a slide in here. I'm going to back up. No, we're good. All right. So there's an appropriate place for technology. You got to find it. If we hide from these technologies, they're not going to go away. So things like thermal. What's the appropriate place for thermal? Well, it's probably not during the season that an archery hunter is out there trying to chase big bulls against other archery hunters trying to chase big bulls. But there is a place for it. There's a place for predators. There is a place for recovery of game. There's a place for depredation, but probably just not for glassing, right? These are things that agencies need to think about. If you just create a rule that says, I'm going to ban this, well, the technology is not going to go away. The technology is going to be there. And what you've done is handicapped the appropriate uses of the technology by banning it carte blanche. What are some things that agencies should try and avoid, the don'ts? Remember, as agencies, to stay, your statute says, stay flexible. It says flexibility, don't lose it. Resist the temptation to wander into minutia. What do I mean by that? Well, 300 Blackout is essentially the exact same cartridge energy-wise as the 3030. But that cartridge is outlawed in some states that will only let people hunt with straight-walled cartridges. Why? Because they wanted to limit energy. They wanted to limit how far a bullet would go. But instead of making a regulation that was appropriate, they just did a straight-walled cartridge ban. And so now you have 458 SOCOMs and 44 mags and all these different things where people are skirting around the edges and nobody even knows why anymore they had that. straight, the straight wall ban. So think about that. Don't create a new barrier where there shouldn't be one. Keep it simple. For example, 1,500 foot-pounds and 1,500 feet per second and 1,000 foot-pounds. That's generally accepted as adequate for taking big game animals such as deer. Draw weight restrictions. All these things are super clean. That's the way you should be doing regulations. You shouldn't be doing them based on something that sometimes we may not even understand. Think about the future growth. Don't tie your policies to a tradition. If your hunting regs are built on an aging demographic, on making everybody wear the same flannel that I wear, you messed up. Because at some point, we're gone, and the people who come after us have to deal with what we created. Always remember that the agency's role is to manage numbers. It is not to manage the personal journey. Embrace opportunities for growth. Reject barriers to growth. Ask yourself whether you're creating new opportunities, making better hunters, making greater efficacy, or whether you're just creating barriers to new people's entry anytime you look at technology. So with that, I think that's my final slide. No, I got one more. My take home is this: new isn't always bad, and in most cases, it's actually good. That is why technology improves. Don't be afraid to ask the difference between of cheating versus efficacy. Shun the first, embrace the second. And if it gives an unfair advantage to what you other, so this is the example. If it gives an unfair advantage to find something that you wouldn't be able to find otherwise, go ahead and question that. If the improvement is in the certainty that after you make the decision to shoot, it's going to be a good shot, embrace that technology. Thank you all for your time. I'll stick around for questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nephi. Very much appreciate you tuning in from Wyoming. Last but certainly not least, we have Dan Forster, who is the Vice President and Chief Conservation Officer for the Archery Trade Association. Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Great. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate the patience. I enjoyed the other presentations. Hopefully you can see my slide presentation now. Good deal. I see a thumbs up. So first, I want to thank all the working group members for being here and for taking of your valuable time, and also to the department for putting this effort together. I think this is exactly how a state agency should work in cooperation with the hunting public. A quick word about the Archery Trade Association, who I represent. We essentially are the trade association for all things archery. If you are in archery business, you're likely a member of the ATA. And one of the things we try and do, obviously, is grow the industry, but we do that by working with state agencies and partners focused on growing participation, both hunting participation as well as target archery participation. And I represent the ATA and handle their conservation agenda. So I work a lot with state fish and wildlife agencies and other policymakers relative to good conservation policy. And while I work for a trade association now, I spent the bulk of my career actually with the state fish and wildlife agency. Retired from the Georgia Wildlife Resources Division a few years back after spending the last 12 years as director of that agency. So I've spent a lot of time working on regulations, answering technology questions, working with the public, and now I get to spend at least some of my time working with some other boards and federal advisory committees and the like, continuing the work that I love to do. So you heard a little bit earlier that basically the Idaho Fish and Game's management goal is to manage for sustainable wildlife. And they do that through a means of biological professionalism. But within the constraints of the biology, they obviously have to manage for society, the benefits and the opportunities that people want. If you're talking about an elk herd, the agency has to manage the habitat, the elk populations, but they also have to allocate opportunity to the public in a way that they can support the opportunities and the limits that are provided. And then obviously, you've got to have political support, which often mimics the social support. Otherwise, things get kind of wonky and you can lose funding, you can lose authorities and the like. So the management of that sweet spot where you've got everything in alignment, the biology, the social sciences, and the political sciences, is what the agency is focused on. And technology and fair chase standards are one of those things that are challenging for agencies to spend time managing. If you're going to manage for technology and fair chase standards as part of your regulations, then obviously they need to conform and be supported by the hunting public, but not only the hunting public, but the general public as well. And you can learn from other states. One of the values I found as being a state director is everybody's dealing with the same things. And sometimes others are ahead of you and behind you. And I think this group and state agencies can learn, from that. And all regulations should also be viewed through a participation lens. And by that, I mean, you need your constituency to be supportive. They want to participate, and you can do things that stifle and cause participation to fall off, and the funding that comes with that. And so always be privy to the impacts. Is something necessary? Is a regulation a barrier to entry? And another big one is it enforceable? If you can't enforce it, then you have to question what value is it in the first place. And then Nephi alluded to this. You have to visit these things frequently. The work of this committee will come to an end at some point, but the reality is technology is going to continue. The public opinions are going to change. Participation is going to change, and things are not going to be static. And so the agency needs to address these periodically as they go along. So I want to spend most of my time today talking about a related project that I worked on first in 2017 and then 2023, where we looked at equipment regulations in the bow hunting world across the nation. And we did this because we saw a lot of complexity and a lot of regulations that were just all over the board regarding metrics of things that we didn't know where they came from. And so we were interested in shedding light on the complexity. And this included things like arrow length and arrow weight and bolt length and broadhead diameter and magnified sights and percent let off and minimum draw weight. There were over 60 different metrics that state agencies regulated, most of which had no industry engagement. For a matter of fact, there's only 3 out of those 60 that our trade association even had a position on, and only 1 was quantifiable. So again, we were hopeful that we could eliminate unnecessary regulations and then help states improve how they present regulations so that they're comprehensive and easy to read. The other thing we were striving for was to inform states of the new technologies. There's always folks out there wanting to build a better mousetrap, and things like double rail crossbows emerged in the last couple of years. So you could shoot 2 arrows, in sequence if you want. The arrow shooting air guns has emerged, and a lot of states are dealing with that. There is a new technology called a tension spring technology in the crossbow world, where rather than having limbs, the limbs are wound around like a coil and used to propel the arrow. And depending on the state's regulation, may or may not be legal. And things like plastic broadheads have emerged as well. And a point I want to make here is that technology in itself is not inherently good or bad, right? It's the application of technologies that you have to monitor and evaluate as to whether or not it's a good fit for you. And social science is one of the major considerations for that. Now, we did this national evaluation not to convey metrics that our association wanted states to adopt. Matter of fact, we only had 3 policy statements on any of those technologies. And one was with arrow shooting air guns, and we simply say, it doesn't have a string, it doesn't have limbs, it's not a bow, so keep those types of equipment out of any archery season you may have. And crossbows, there's now, I think, 38 states that allow crossbows to be used during an archery season. And our position simply says, we support state agencies and what they want to do with crossbows. It's a legitimate tool for harvesting animals, but whether you choose to include that in an archery season or not, that's up to you all, not something that our association is going to try and get engaged in. The one metric that we do have a position on is minimum draw weight. State agencies had draw weights that were all over the board. And this is a good example of where technology during a time and place generated a set of regulations that most states adopted. But if you fast forward 30, 40 years from when minimum draw weights for bows were originally adopted, the technology of the equipment today now produces way more foot-pounds of energy for a much lighter draw weight than the draw weights that were adopted then. So our recommendation is a 30-pound minimum draw weight is quite adequate, delivers the same foot-pounds of energy as what folks were using at 40 pounds, foot-pounds of energy back 20 or 30 years ago. So the summary document that we put together, and I did share this with Ellery, so you all can have that if you're interested. She can certainly share that. Is we looked at all these different metrics and without identifying states, kind of put together a state of the state summary paragraph. For example, with a metric of arrow length, which we would say is a complexity metric. It really doesn't have a lot to do with whether you harvest the animal efficiently or not, but most states don't have an arrow length minimum, yet there's 11 states that regulate that. The ranges of minimums are from 18 to 26 inches. Idaho has a 24-inch. Where those things come from, the time at which they were adopted is a bit of a mystery. But the reality is most states have this, do not have a regulation and have been, functioning fine. So this is an example of complex regulation. Then there's some things that states did that there may have only been 1 or 2 or 3 states that adopted a regulation. Things like broadhead blade thickness. There's only 1 state in the country that actually has a requirement for blade thickness, and it does, in fact, happen to be Idaho. So with our regulation work, we beg the question is, how was this developed? Is it necessary in today's world, and is it enforceable? And if it's been on the books for a while, then how many cases have been made and how many have been litigated? Otherwise, you can actually ask yourself is, do we need to regulate those things and make this less complex for your customers? And we also looked at, the last thing was potential barriers to entry, and draw weight is one of those that is a potential barrier to entry. If you can't pull back a 40-pound bow, but you can pull back a 30-pound bow, then you can hunt. And again, 30-pound bows provide the same foot-pounds of energy as was delivered in a 40-pound bow several years ago. And I would suggest that you can booger up an animal or have bad things happen shooting an 80-pound bow at bad distances or bad shot placement. So it's really a matter of the person using the equipment appropriately, which is an ethical question and hard, if not impossible, for states to regulate. So when we did this 2017 study, we saw a wealth of change. Almost every state changed stuff. We got rid of some metrics, not because we said the ATA says you need to get rid of lighted knots. We never said that. We just we just illuminated the fact that the state may have been in the minority. And it caused many to look at their regulations, and folks took that to heart, and we had really good luck. So we did this again in 2023, and we've shared that with states, and we're in the process now of working with several to change things like minimum draw weight and others to hopefully improve regulations and add some clarity. So we're confident that things have been made easier for customers because we've done this work. So the issue for Idaho is listed here, and out of the, I think, 17 metrics that we focused on for states, there are a number that Idaho was kind of outside the majority position. And all this majority position is simply says that what would the regulation be if most of the states were compliant? So that says most states don't have a regulatory metric for minimum pounds. And if they do, it's 30 pounds or less. So I'd encourage you to kind of look at this work and look at some of those constraints and ask those questions we've already talked about. Is it enforceable? Do law enforcement officers actually have the ability to measure draw weight in the field or percent let off, of which there's only 3 states left in the nation that regulate bow let off? And is this something that could be addressed for minimizing complexity? So, at the end of the day, technology, again, is neither good nor bad. It is a social issue. And when you get to a point where the customers and society can accept or desire a particular piece of technology, then that's something the agency certainly could consider. You obviously don't want to adopt regulations that are not supported by the public, but most technological advances aren't going to have significant impacts on population management, although some may. So as this group continues to work on technology and the fair chase question, obviously the state has to have harvest management goals, as Nephi alluded to, and you've got to manage those. And from a harvest perspective, keep in mind that an elk or mule deer, it doesn't matter whether that animal is harvested with a piece of archery equipment, muzzleloader equipment, whether there's a lighted knock, the bow is a minimum draw weight. It's almost it's not important from a biological perspective, but managing the allocation to your constituencies that want to use various pieces of equipment is where the finesse and the challenge comes in for the agency. And if technology does in fact have some type of measurable impact on harvest rates, then that's how the state can reallocate opportunity. They in theory offer more archery opportunities than firearms opportunities because it's less efficient at harvest. And so that same theory can continue to be applied and continue to make room for equipment, especially those pieces of equipment that help folks retrieve and make their harvest more efficient. And again, I thank you for the time that you're devoting to this effort, and I look forward to being able to answer any questions you may have after the break as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, we're now going to take a 5-minute break. Come back, please, at 22 minutes after the hour. I think some of you are in Northern Idaho, so I'm not going to say the hour. But if we come back in 5 minutes with being prepared to ask questions. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. Working group members, if you have a question to ask, click on the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand. And that will let us know who is interested in asking a question. Zoom keeps track of the order in which hands are raised. So we'll go in order, and I believe we have our first question from Hallie. So remember, when you ask a question, you need to turn on your microphone. And it'd be good to turn on your camera so they can see who's asking as well.
Hi, so my question is for Abram. Abram, I really appreciated your presentation. I think it was really important what you showed us as an expert in the field of, advanced optics. One of my concerns in the discussions that we've already had is that it seems, folks might be forming opinions about technologies when maybe they haven't actually had direct use of them themselves or had any contact with technologies. And so I really appreciate your perspective. And I wanted to just have you maybe reiterate your point about the distance that a person can actually see or identify an animal with a thermal or night vision. I believe you said, after about 200 yards, you really can't see or identify an animal. And also, that these things can't see through trees and brush.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will explain the use of thermals a little bit more there. So thermals in general, and I'm using the best of the best known technology for my answers here, can see an amazingly long ways, miles and miles and miles. However, the resolution, which is the detail you can put together, is not there. So if there's a deer at 1,000 yards away, you will easily be able to see a heat signature. You'll be able to see there is something there, but you will not be able to tell if it's a deer, a coyote, if it's a rock, unless it moves. So when I say the ability to identify an animal beyond 1 to 200 yards, in my opinion, it's a military term where you can identify a friendly versus an enemy. You could identify a buck versus a doe, a mule deer versus a whitetail. Those sort of distances, even 200 yards, you would be very tough to positively identify an animal, the same as you could with a set of binoculars. Antlers in general don't show heat, so you're not going to be able to see a nice rack and say that's a mule deer, that's a whitetail. You're looking at body shape for identification. So for me, that's one of the reasons I don't think they really belong on a rifle. If you can't tell a deer versus a cow elk, that would be a problem. And as far as looking through brush, thermals in general, it's same wavelength. It's much the same as using a spotting scope. If there's an animal there that you can see with the spotting scope, you can see it with a thermal, and vice versa. If it's behind a really leafy bush and you can't see any part of it with a spotting scope, you won't be able to see any part of it with a thermal. If there's a pocket of it where you can see a 4-inch section, you'll see a 4-inch white hotspot. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Nevi, did you want to add to that response? Or
Yeah, so I've worked
did
on
you have a
number of-
question?
No, I don't know if it's a question or just adding to the response, but we of course have worked on legislation relating to thermal across many states now. And so the one thing I would say is, again, be careful with your regulations. I think, it's been rightly pointed out that thermal is not going to replace a spotting scope in terms of being able to see, how big an animal's rack is. That said, I can drive around in the middle of the night with a thermal, and I've used very high-end thermal as well, vehicle mounted stuff on a pickup, and I can see an elk herd in the middle of the night. And so I think you need to think about, like, how does your state, how do you sit on things like spotlighting, and begin to think of thermal as something very similar to, to how you would use another light source. If you wouldn't let somebody spotlight big game, maybe that's a good place to start with how you feel about thermal and where and when it can be used appropriately. The caveat that I want to throw out there is be careful that you don't just say, well, you can't have thermal on a rifle in Idaho. Because the problem is that there are areas, and I know that other folks would weigh in, where thermal actually is the exact right tool. So if you're talking about predators that are often hunted at night, when it is the right tool. If you're talking about depredation, think about feral hogs. The efficacy of using thermal and suppressors on feral hogs, it's 10 times better than any other tool they have right now for controlling feral hogs in Texas. So if you passed a law that just said we're not going to let people have and use thermal, you'd be making a big mistake. So make sure you leave a place for these technologies where it's appropriate, because you're not talking about this technology carte blanche. There are those big game hunting season with the big animals with the big horns where we do have rules in place, and it's just different. And there are different kinds of hunting, and there are different seasons, and there are different methods of take for a reason. So be careful not to just say, like, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Thank you. Chelsea.
Thank you, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. I have a follow-up question for Abram. You mentioned that thermal is it's less a product of the wavelength and more a product of the resolution, correct?
It is limited by the resolution.
Okay.
Yes.
When dealing with consumer grade infrared, what is I guess, is that resolution limited by your screen? Is it limited by what you can carry? Is it limited by the weight? And I guess the reason that I'm asking this is I've got 2,500 hours of speciating deer and elk from aircraft using webcam and FLIR grade technology, where we were able to see that stuff really well. However, we were using convective cooled mid-wave infrared and not long-wave infrared. And I know that the black body emittance is slightly different on those two things. So I was wondering if you could just speak more directly to on-the-ground thermal, because that is.
Yes. So the mid-wave infrared, and including SWIR bands, which is shortwave infrared, it operates in a slightly different wavelength. They have different limitations. Some of those can even see through smoke and dust and fog, but typically they require a cooler, and most, if not all of them, are ITAR controlled item, which means that they're not available for consumer purchase. They're military grade, they're a state agency only sort of product. As far as the wavelength itself and the difference, so the limiting factor to resolution is how much detail you can get in an animal, is the size of the objective. So if you're doing aerial work or extreme long distance, you need an objective that's like 80 millimeters or 100 millimeters. And the lenses used in thermal are germanium. So those lenses would be tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, you're talking about thermals that are probably $100,000 and up. So most of the consumer level stuff is like a 50 millimeter objective or smaller. And that's to keep it in a price point sub $10,000. The other part of that is the sensor itself. So thermal has a sensor much like a DSLR camera. Currently, the the best commercial grade sensors are 640 by 480 resolution, which is really, really terrible. Your cell phone's like 2000 plus pixels, and we're talking 600 by 480. So the sensors themselves limit the pixel resolution or the pixelation, the graininess of the image, but the light itself getting to the sensor, which really defines how much detail you can see in an animal and at how far away, is by the objective size.
That's awesome. Thank you. Kind of quick follow-up question. This technology obviously exists. You mentioned that it's either military or ITAR controlled. When do you see essentially last year's military technology becoming next year's consumer grade technology? Right, we're using smartphones and cell phones that I'm sure during the Cold War were all the rage for emerging technology in the workplace. When do you see this technology dropping down into the threshold of consumer grade? Or do you?
I honestly don't expect substantial improvements to commercial grade product due to the government regulation in selling them. I'd have to dig in a little bit more detail on the specific ITAR requirements, but I know that there are limits on using cooled microbolometers to get that higher resolution, as well as pixel size. So 12 micron bolometers are some of the best offered by Pulsar and WinRed and iRay. Anything better than that is government controlled, and I don't foresee regulation changes making them available to consumer.
Thank you. Next up is Nathan Guy.
Yeah, this is for Abram, maybe Nephi with NSF. Do you guys have any data on thermals sold versus scopes? If I sell 500 scopes in my store, it may be one thermal. I mean, this may be a very small percentage we're looking at that even have this technology in their hands.
So that's a great question. And I think the short answer is we could get it, but we don't have a great handle on it right now. I think that you're right. You're absolutely right. Thermal is an emerging technology. I would expect that you're going to see more and more of it because the price point of thermal is coming down, as well as digital night vision. It's something that we're going to see more of. I can't say this enough. You're going to see more of it. So what's the appropriate place for it? Because it does have an appropriate place in hunting. And it's not just predators and depredation. There's also a national paper that came out from the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies very recently talking about the importance for issues of CWB and potential other issues with wildlife health of recovering downed wildlife. There's no better tool than a thermal for being able to find an animal that you have already put a bullet in that now is laying dead someplace that you couldn't find before. So again, with your rigs, be very cautious. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is good stuff. You're going to see it more and more. And if you take away the appropriate use of the technology because we're not forward thinking, that's a mistake in how we've made the regulation. So just be careful with that.
Hallie. Oh, did someone want to add something?
I would just agree.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hallie?
Sorry, I don't want to talk too much, but I really wanted to thank Dan for pointing out that we also have the opportunity in this group to recommend changes that would allow things that are currently off limits. So that's part of our charge as well, I think, in this group, that we can do that. And, you know, I also appreciated him pointing out the draw weight limitations, you know, that is a barrier to entry for, you know, women in particular and kids. So I appreciate him pointing that out.
Thank you. Alex Martin?
Sorry, Chelsea followed up and answered my question, so I'm good.
Oh, okay, great. Hallie, your hand is still up, and Alex, if you could put your hand down. Dylan Halverson? Uh-oh.
Hi there. My question, so Nephi kind of hit it right off the bat there. But I agreed. I think he makes some really good points about thermal technology and where it is, and making sure that we, if there are certain things that we do think are don't fit fair chase, making sure not to throw them out. One of the things he brought up, and Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think like predators, even predatory big game is currently outside of our scope, correct? So
That
this
is
is
correct. Yeah.
deer, elk. So just to kind of clarify that out there for anybody that didn't know that, we're currently that would be outside the scope of this charge of this group. One other thing, so to Abram, so Nephi kind of threw out there a question. It was my question, but I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of respond with the comparison of thermals and spotlighting. So currently spotlighting is illegal in Idaho. As I'm sure many people have all played with flashlights and stuff, and with flashlight technology that's out there today, weapon lights and stuff, there's some pretty amazing lights and the ability to reach out to some of those similar distances that you were talking about with thermal technology and trying to minimize its, your ability to be able to see distances. So there's kind of a similarity there, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of give a response to maybe where you see there being a difference between spotlighting and maybe where there could be some opportunity for fair chase, just to give you an opportunity in response to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. So I have 2 points that I'd like to go over there. The first is a difference with spotlighting. Admittedly, they're very much the same. With a spotlight, you can light a critter in the dark. With a thermal, you can see it in the dark. The big difference I draw is the invasive nature of spotlighting. When you spotlight, you disturb that animal, all of the animals around it, and anyone or anything that can see your beam for miles and miles around. We all know the kids in high school driving around with a spotlight, lighting up every field, scaring every deer away, every elk away, and spooking them at night when they're out there trying to feed. With the thermal, it's completely non-invasive. There is zero light emitted. You are only capturing the light that's already there. We can't see it, but it's still there just the same as it is in the daylight to your thermal. So for me, it's a difference of being invasive and spooking the animals and disturbing them and everyone else versus just seeing what's out there. The second side of that, he mentioned having vehicle mounted thermal, driving around, seeing an entire elk herd. I absolutely can recognize the concern there, and that is not, at least in my opinion, a fair chase endeavor. But it is extremely valuable when you're hog hunting. Could also be extremely valuable if you're doing predator management in the desert. So I think that there's room for some discussion there. Really, that car mounted, vehicle mounted comes back to where I'm at on road hunting, side by side hunting, using a motor vehicle as part of your hunting. That I have a problem with that. And so being able to cover hundreds of miles in a night and do that from a vehicle, I think that there's more conversations that need to be had on that aspect of it. Over.
Thank you. Ken Crane?
There we go. You got me?
Yes.
All right. Hey, I want to express my appreciation for speakers taking time today. I've learned something about each topic from everybody. So I appreciate your time. And I think one of our biggest challenges here is where's that line, and then the enforceability part of it. There's comments, and there's a place for everything, and having the efficacy, the most efficient tool available to make a clean, ethical kill. I think everybody shares that point. It's where to draw the line on that, and then how to enforce these things and maintain these other values that everybody's identified that are important to them. So I think we've learned a lot tonight on that, but on the limitations of some of the technology and some of the importance to maintain them as a tool, but how to draw that line and make it enforceable to follow up is going to be pretty much one of our hardest tasks. I did have a point of clarification or a question for clarification from Dan on the archery. So you commented that 30 pounds minimum now is equal to what 40 was. And I'm curious, I am assuming you're talking mechanical bows, not traditional archery gear. Is that correct?
So essentially, it's a blending of the two. And the reason we did this is because California had they had a casting distance regulation. They said, we understand the absurdity of that. You can't have a bow unless it casts an arrow so many feet. So we had our engineers across the industry look at this. And obviously you can't shoot animals and quantify how long it takes them to die. So they simply looked at the efficiency of equipment when those regulations were drawn. And when most of those were drawn, they were using recurve bows. And there was 40-pound recurve bows delivering X amount of energy at certain distances. Now the compound technology delivers that equivalent or more in most cases, not to mention the improved efficiencies with arrow and broadhead technologies that have improved. So it's comparing apples and oranges. A 40-pound minimum today with a compound is way more efficient than what a 40-pound recurve would have been when most of these regulations were drawn up 20, 30, 40 years ago. I don't know when Idaho's was, but I'm sure it's decades old. So that's the basis for where that came from. And in addition, we also surveyed those 20-some states that either had 0 minimums or 30-pound minimums and said, hey, have you ever made any cases? Have you documented any problems? And to the state, we had nobody that said, hey, yeah, we have a problem. Don't do what we did. And so that's why we landed on that one and only recommendation to satisfy California, but also give some clarity for hopefully improving entry.
So you're, just so I'm perfectly clear, your ATA is saying that a 30-pound recurve today is adequate.
So what we're saying is if you are a state agency and you're going to adopt a minimum, we recommend that for entry-level game like whitetail deer, 30-pound minimum is what you ought to do. And absolutely, there are lots of cases, particularly in the Southeast, where there's almost no Southeastern states with a minimum, where you can shoot an animal, maybe it's hunting over bait in states at 15 yards. And you know, there's lots of things that are equivalent. Compare that to somebody shooting, you know, trying to shoot something at 70 yards with 80-pound bow. The poundage is almost irrelevant. It's the ability of the user to understand what their limitations are and using it appropriately. And when you add the fact that it's basically unenforceable, used in appropriate situations, 30 pounds will certainly do the job. Compare that against the complexity and the barrier to entry for just over constricting. That's why our board and our industry is comfortable with that recommendation.
Thank you. Jeremiah Manny, we're over time. I'm gonna let it go a couple more minutes, but so keep it short, please.
Absolutely. So this question is for Nephi. During his presentation, he talked about foot-pounds of energy and velocity, say at 1,000 yards for a clean ethical kill. Can you state the source for that? Because with all the different bullets and densities and things like that with solids now, where you get massive penetration with solids versus some of the polymer tips. I just kind of curious what the source is that's stating 1,000 foot-pounds of energy with modern bullets.
Yeah, I would have to, that's tough because it's more crowdsourced. If you go to all of your fish and wildlife agencies and kind of, it's just been an industry standard that you typically have seen, and you'll see this probably in your handgun regulations if you have them, this idea of a minimum foot-pounds of energy and a minimum and a minimum speed. And the reason that that's important, right, is because, and as you know, you mentioned different bullet construction. Some bullets are designed to open at 2,000 feet per second. Some bullets are designed to open at 1,500 feet per second. But in generally, when you drop below that speed, you don't get with a high-powered rifle. You know, those bullets, a handgun bullet will still open. A rifle bullet isn't designed to do that. It has to do with design. It's going to fluctuate with technology. The energy, the foot-pounds of energy is widely accepted. 1,000 foot-pounds for deer-sized animals, 1,500 for elk across many game and fish agencies. And so the thing that I think is important in this is I totally agree with the discussion from Dan about archery tackle. I think there's a corollary in rifle tackle where I think as agencies, you kind of have to set an expectation and you're never going to be able to measure it. You're never going to be able to say like, your rifle has to be able to deliver 1,000 foot-pounds of energy and 1,500 feet per second at the animal. You're right. You're not going to be able to measure that. But what you're doing is you're teaching hunters to look at the data that's on their box or in their rifle or whatever, and you're challenging them to understand what's going on. And that's how you build the ethic, right? You build the ethic by helping them understand that reasoning. And then you have to allow them to know that, well, I shoot a Burger hybrid versus I shoot a triple shock. How fast is my bullet open at? Well, there's on the back of the box. What's it say it was designed for? And these are all going to be personal decisions that hunters are going to have to work through. But hunters are smart. They'll make good choices. You have to, you have to allow them to do that. And if you just set an arbitrary number, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, you can't shoot past this distance or whatever. That's usually not the best way. You gotta be creative with it. I don't envy you in having to do that, but I just say keep it simple and allow hunters to understand the ethic, and then don't kill your game wardens by having them out there with a radar gun and weigh this, measure that, all those things. That's not effective regulation.
Yeah, because what I'm seeing happening right now is with inflated numbers from BCs to velocities from manufacturers. For instance, the 7 PRC is a popular one right now, where it's stated on the box it's 2950 with a 180, 190, whatever the case is. But they're actually only doing 2800 just due to the fact of availability of components at these in these times right now. So even if the hunter was to look at the box, it's still not there for the average hunter. As a long range shooter, we look at all of that stuff to a T, where we dope everything out, 1,600 yards and stuff like that. So we know the velocities and the energies all the way out to make those clean ethical kills. But for an average hunter, how do we go about that?
Here's why you got to be careful of the regulatory.
We need to stop right there. I'm sorry. We've got
one
more
point. This is very important. The old guy with a 30-06 thinks he's doing the great job shooting 150 grain bullet, and he's confident that he's got enough energy. And I'm telling you right now, and you know this, at 300 yards, 6.5 Creedmoor runs away from it energy-wise and velocity-wise. And that's why agencies, you got to be careful not to create a law or a reg that says you have to have a 30-06, because it's not that simple. The technology, it's all in here. People are getting smarter. They can read about it. Make sure that you understand that as you're developing regs.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Last question from Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know. Can you see my screen?
No, we can see you. Is that what you mean?
Well, you can hear me, correct?
Yeah, I can see and hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. my question is for Nephi, but well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for presenting. I found all the presentations to be very, very informative. But the question for Nephi, I was wondering if the National Shooting Sport Foundation, if they have any data like the metric that that Dan and the ATA had put together with the very varying aspects for, say, muzzle loaders or high-powered rifles, you know, the different weapons, that the different variables, and how those variables are controlled in the various states. And for a comparison, you know, what Idaho's got in as far as muzzle loading and even modern rifle or modern weapons. But anyway, I was just wondering if the National Shooting Sport Foundation had any information like that.
We don't have anything like that compiled. I appreciate the question. The take home I would give all of you is this: simplify regulations. They've gotten too complex. The tech, like whatever you can do, don't look at all the other crazy things that everybody's tried to figure out how to do this. Make your rigs as simple as possible, and keep in mind what the agency, what you should actually be looking at. Encourage people to use the most the most efficient method possible. And then remember, as an agency, your charge, look at manage the seasons, manage the herd. Don't get wrapped around the axle trying to manage the bullet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, it looks like John would like to add something.
I just wanted to add, just on that point, great question, Jeff, on that. There are a couple of different organizations, I think, that are working on that as far as comparison from state agency to state agency. And so I want to say, and Dan may know too, that there was a multi-state grant that was funded. I'm trying to remember the researcher on there, but I can work with Ellery to make sure that the committee sees and hears about that. But it was a multi-state grant, which essentially is using Pittman-Robertson excise tax to fund a research project on the complexity of some game regulations. And one thing that we found as an industry going in there when we launched our Fire Stick product was there was several states that had literally identical word for word definitions of what a muzzleloader was, but yet each state defined them separately within their legal teams. And so there are projects that are out there, I think, that could help this. And I'll make sure that I pass those along to Ellery and the team to share with the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
You bet.
Okay. We have come to the end of the question and answer session. I noticed that Kevin and Bryce both raised their hand and then put it back down again. If you have additional questions that you'd like for Ellery to pass along to the presenters, please send her an email and we'll see if we can get additional questions answered. So with that, we are now ready to get into our small group discussions. And I want to share my screen. Working group members are going to be now organized into breakout rooms. One room will stay here so that we can let the public observe the conversation. So not everybody's going to get an invitation to a breakout room. If you don't get one, that means you're in this room. We'd like you to have your cameras on if possible and your microphones open so that you can participate in the conversations. The first round, we're going to be talking about what are your reactions to what you've heard today. If each group could identify someone that will capture the notes from you as a group, and use the Google file that I sent earlier today to record what your group came up with. Maybe it's going to be reactions that are all over the map, or maybe you're going to say, we all agree this. Make sure you're clearly explaining how many of you agreed with whatever gets recorded. So if everybody can keep an eye on what's getting recorded, you can keep each other honest. And I think with that we're going to be on 20-minute rotations instead of 25 because we're running a little bit behind, and I'm going to try really hard to get done at 9, like we said. So with that, Ellery will send you all off into conversations.
Yep, and I will just say to our presenters, you're more than welcome to hang around. But I know some of you are on very different time zones, so if you want to leave, you are more than welcome to do so. But if you want to stick around, you're also welcome to do so to observe.
And we were negligent in telling you that we all appreciate all of the presentations. So thank you very much for your sharing your thoughts today.
Awesome. All right,
Okay,
here we go to breakout rooms.
see you soon.
Okay, so in this room, we should have group 5, which is Jeremiah, Tim, Doug, and Ken. So feel free to have your conversation to the prompt.
Hey, guys. So we're the group without the public, is that correct?
No, you're in the public room.
Oh, okay. So I guess we're just answering what our reactions to what we heard, right, Wendy?
Yes. I'm gonna not interfere, so.
Right. So I'll start out. You know, I stated it when I asked a question earlier, got on earlier. I did learn a lot. And I think a lot of good points were made by each group. The one that I had a little trouble at first with the presentation on the imaging, but the question and answer session helped ferret out a lot of the issues I was having with what was shared. And I think part of my point in looking at that tool and that technology isn't necessarily that perhaps you're judging the quality of a trophy, perhaps per se, but you're finding animals with it. And that's not something you would do with your naked eye or with a spotting scope or any other optics, unless it was standing out in the open. And so at night, you know, you can drive around and find where you want to start in the morning. You may not know what if there's a big bull or a buck there, but you're going to know there's animals. And that's an advantage that you don't have naturally. So it seems to me that's a little bit too far for me on the ethical question.
Ken, I think, you know, my reaction to some of this conversation is, you know, less to the point of, you know, I don't think I'm a point in any of this conversation of where do I draw the line here versus there. I think we're going to have quite a few conversations, and I'm going to continue to learn from folks in different presentations as they come through. I think the one question that is going to be a tough question for us to tackle is at the end of this, it's not just a thumbs up or thumbs down to specific types of technology, regardless of what we're talking about. I think it's specific recommendations of an enforceable regulation. And I think that's the most difficult thing to do. I think I heard from the presenters today that we need flexible technology. We need to be thoughtful about efficiency. We need to be thoughtful about every hunter has a different why and why they walk into the woods and walk in the mountains and they, pursue game. And I don't think I functionally disagreed with any of those statements or the reasoning, but I also heard from each one of the presenters that each of them had their own, I'll call it like levels of nuance where they thought maybe it could be unfair to the game, and where they might draw their particular lines. And I think that becomes the question of, when it comes to this committee and the recommendations, and we have to draw those lines, will we be able to draw a line that is actually enforceable and has tools for the fish and game officers to distinguish the nuance? And so, example of that, like, gets in, like, let's just use the thermal example. And it was very clear from the thermal example that there are real potential uses that we should consider. Some that are germane to this committee, within the realm of big game hunting, and then some of them they talked about that were kind of outside of this committee's purview, into some of the predator management. And in both of those scenarios, when you have crossing seasons and tags, we have hunters that have multiple tags in their pockets, that some of which are relevant to big game hunting and some of which are relevant to predators. Some of the responsibility of this committee is to navigate the nuance of how do we actually equip when we don't think it's appropriate for some specific technology, wherever we draw the line. How are we able to come to a specific recommendation that actually allows fish and game officers to enforce the regulation? And so I think that's, my initial gut reaction of like, look forward to kind of learning some more and learning for some future conversation around how do we even get to that nuance?
No, I think you're right. And I said, yeah, and I think we got to be careful about, the opinion at this point, because for me, I'm learning a lot. I learned some of the more basics today, so it's I'm hopeful that we're going to continue to learn more here. But I do believe that you're correct in that the enforceability is going to be the challenge. And I did appreciate, the comment by the speakers of the flexibility and making sure we leave room for the appropriate use of the tools. And but I really think that's going to be a challenge to keep that flexibility and allow for the enforceability of it, because we heard early on in the last meeting about the choice of wording of the rules, and then being able to the officers and then the courts to be able to decide if a law was broken or a regulation was broken. So I really see that to be the hardest part of our job here.
I mean, I think a lot of it's just like a lot of the other regulations that are it's something has to be observed to be, illegal, or you have to be caught doing something illegal, right? For the enforcement of it. But yeah, I felt that way. And Ken, you hit it right off the bat. I mean, it was a little slanted, I guess, having seen what thermal imaging will do. It's not in the judging. No one's judging animals with, thermal night vision stuff. It's the finding. It makes it incredible. It gives you a huge advantage in the finding. And we have people driving around in the middle of the night, finding stuff, knowing where herds are, so they can then go in the daylight with the spotting scope and judge and find and narrow it down. And so it's got to be observed to be enforceable. But other states are just, I mean, when you say, Nephi said it a lot, multiple times, like, keep it simple. I mean, other states are saying it's illegal to use it just during big game hunting. I mean, Utah, I think, has certain dates, July 31st through the end of the year, where it's illegal when the big game hunts are going. Some people are out there using it for predators, and that's been Tim mentioned that you can be hunting predators and have a deer tag in your pocket at the same time. And so, but it's, if you've seen what they'll do, it's pretty eye-opening, I think. And so I don't know. That's just kind of my opinion on it. I think it was I think Abram, must really like it and wants to keep it. And I understand that. And there is a place people use them for predator, and they're a pretty neat tool. I mean, it's cool technology, right? But I guess that's just my opinion on that. Is it's borderline like staggering what you can see, and then you just pull out your spotting scope and see what it is.
One of the thoughts I'd like to hear what you guys think on this. So clearly, I mean, and we spoke to this last time we met, was we want to be efficient, right? We want an ethical kill, quick kill. We don't want an animal to unnecessarily suffer more than needed. But that's kind of to the point of where there's some concern now that the efficacy of our tools at hand are to the point where the sustainability of good demographics in our herds, let alone the numbers, are becoming a problem. And a problem in the sense that, there's going to be less opportunity, but also the fact that a herd cannot maintain its genetic viability. I guess that might be maybe an overstatement, but if the top animals are always killed out of every herd, what you're left is with inferior genetics and perhaps inappropriate male to female objectives. So we're having open cows and does, or late fawners and calvers, which is a problem as well for winter survivability. But the efficiency of the tool is going to continue to be a challenge to those concerns. And I'm kind of curious what everybody else thought about some of those comments today.
Meaning just the tool is becoming increasingly efficient. Is that what you're saying, Ken?
Well, yeah, and there was, I think it was Nephi that was saying, it's like, hey, we got to, if it's the tool with the most efficacy, then it needs to remain on the table. And I get that. And because if it's the most efficient, we're going to cleaner, quicker kill.
Yeah.
And that's what we all want. But two, there's that line, that if we're too efficient at killing animals, then that's going to affect that number one priority that came out of the group, and that we want to maintain that opportunity to hunt. And that's just simply two objectives that I don't think can stay aligned very well, very long anyway.
I think you're right. I think it's where does efficiency and unfairness, or the fair chase, kind of cross and mesh, right? And I think that's what's hard, because when rangefinders came out eons ago, not eons, but decades ago, I mean, some people felt they were unfair, and now we wouldn't think about not having that, because it makes us more efficient, quicker kills, clean kills. You know what I mean? So at what point is the technology become unfair? And I think that's maybe what we have to think about it, is how we feel about something, and has it crossed that line to being unfair in the fair chase aspect versus does it make me more efficient?
I just want to pop in and remind you to record notes on the Google folder so that you have a record of what you discussed.
Jotting some notes, Wendy.
Okay.
I'll have to
Great.
take them from
Thank you.
paper and put it into Google Notes.
Oh, good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I saw Tim taking notes. I thought that was.
Jeremiah, do you have any thoughts? Haven't heard from you yet.
It appears that he was assigned to a different room than I had intended, so he's not here. Sorry about that. Okay.
No, Ken and Doug, I mean, I think, you know, in our first meeting, a core part of it was, you know, asking each of the members of why Idaho, what makes Idaho so special. And I don't think there was a single person in the room that talked about, that didn't value access and opportunity, that didn't, you know, have a high rating on the ability to have a tag every single year. That you might not be able to hunt the same exact unit every single year, but like you have the ability to go get a tag for yourself or find an opportunity to go hunt with a family member. And so I think that's what makes, you know, this conversation, you know, difficult is anytime somebody asks you to try to regulate something, that means there's going to be a trade-off. And so if you regulate it, the trade-off is you no longer have that innovation, and you don't have that efficiency, and you don't have those market values and the various different unique tools that make you more efficient and more effective. On the flip side of it, you know, you could make the same argument. If you regulate it, will it change your efficiency? Will it lower the efficiency and the take rate and things like that? And so I do question, you know, have we started to piece out in the various different seasons and the various different takes, the impacts of all the different types of technology? My guess is because it's technology and there's a pacing problem, it's developing at a rate that nobody ever expected that it's going to develop at, that even from a fish and game perspective, it's near impossible to determine, you know, this type of scope increases hunter efficiency by this much and increases the take by this percentage. But in a way, that's a little bit of what we're being asked to do, is what is the trade-off of each of these particular topics? And then it has like the crossover into ethics as well. And I think each hunter arguably defines ethics in a very different way. Just talking out loud.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to regulate ethics between person to person. It's just very different. I really enjoyed, was it Dan? The guy from Georgia, archery guy. He, you know, some of the archery, I've hunted a lot of archery, haven't done it lately, and so I thought that was very interesting. And some of those limits and technologies that maybe are outdated, that have been surpassed, and you know, the bow weight, the draw weight, those kind of things, the let off. You know, things like that used to be a bigger issue maybe in the technology aspect, and now it doesn't seem like a lot of people. It's just a normal now. So, you know, I'm just trying to think of different maybe parallels in the rifle hunting world that are those same kind of things that I think I mentioned one in a rangefinder. You wouldn't dream of doing it now, and now no one bats an eye, but I think over time, a lot of these others will continue to be that way. I think definitely, again, just thinking out loud, that, you know, because we're not biologists and we don't have kind of the numbers that take, you know, success rates, those kind of things that are a necessary part, I think, of some of these discussions. But yeah, I mean, I look in my circles, family, friends, and we hunt with, and there's definitely animals getting killed because of technology ability to do different things that I would say even 10 years ago wouldn't have gotten killed. And at some point that ends up affecting our opportunity or tag numbers or access to that technology, I think.
Just a heads up, everyone's going to be coming back in about 30 seconds, so we will be in large room again.
So Tim, are you able to put some of those notes then in that Google Doc?
Tim, if you're responding, you're muted.
Wendy?
I will just urge all of the groups, if you haven't had a chance to put your notes on the Google folder, it would be great if you could do that even after the meeting ends tonight. We would just want to have a record of what your conversations were to inform you as you go forward. So
we were having issues trying to figure out how to get to that and do that.
okay, well, I'm happy to stay on at the end of the meeting and maybe help somebody do that.
That would be great.
Okay. So, I need to give Ellery a bit of time to set up the groups again, because you're going to be with different people. I saw that a couple of you changed where you were assigned, and you're welcome to do that. We have set up the groups to maximize your opportunity to get to know each other. So, if you accept the invitation to the room that we've given you, you will be talking to people that you won't have a chance to talk to for a few more meetings. So, the next question is, what impacts do you think technology has on the hunting experience in Idaho? And as soon as Hillary is ready to roll, you'll get 20 minutes in a breakout room. One group will stay here. I would encourage you all to keep your cameras on when you're in the room. So it's really hard to listen to and understand somebody if you can't see their face while they're speaking. So as a gift to the other people that you're talking with, try to keep your cameras on if possible. I know sometimes there's a bandwidth issue. But with that, Ellery, whenever you're ready.
Yep, just everyone be patient, please, as I delete folks from rooms and add folks to rooms. So my apologies.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough task that she's doing right now. So Nicole has her hand up. Allie has her hand up. We're not really taking questions right now, but if you have a quick one.
I was just gonna say we don't have edit access on the Google Doc, so in the
I
last
will
group,
fix
only one
that.
of us had that. So
I will fix that. You're all supposed to have it. So I'll try to fix that as you start on your next conversations.
Have we been moved to our rooms?
I'm not sure. Ellery, can you
Yeah,
tell
I'm
us?
still working on it. I'm digging through 80 names of folks. So give me 2 more minutes. Apologies.
Okay. So if you have a link, the way it's set up, everyone that has the link should have editing capabilities. So I'm not exactly clear why you don't have editing privileges. But if you
Where
have,
would we find this link?
it was in an email that I sent at 5
Oh.
o'clock this afternoon.
But it's not on this Zoom thing where you can click
No,
on the
no,
tab.
it's in the email. You have to open the email that I sent this afternoon.
Well, I don't want to try to open an email and stay on this.
Yeah, that's,
You'll lose this,
hopefully
cowboy.
somebody in your room will have done that.
Not me.
We're hunters and fishermen, not
Not tech wizards, I
technology.
know, and we're really testing you here.
Hey, Wendy.
Yes.
So I was just curious, are we gonna go over the harvest success rates today? That Toby Bedreau was that what it said in the one email?
No, we're not gonna have time for that presentation today. So.
Okay.
We plan on having the information to you soon. So yeah,
Okay.
It's coming. We're compiling it currently. Okay. So I believe
Perfect.
I
Thank
have
you.
no problem. I believe I have everyone assigned appropriately. You will be getting an invitation to join a breakout room if you're being selected for a breakout room. The folks that will be staying in this main room will be Nathan Guy, Jeff Shin, Derek Atterbury, and Nicole Swafford. So those folks should be staying put.
All right.
All right. So let me double check. All right, here we go. Breakout rooms commencing, if I did it appropriately.
Just three of us?
I guess it's just us three.
I guess so.
Who's technology? Who can take these note things? Because I can't.
I can't either. I can't find the email.
I mean, I could probably do it after. I just got in and I don't have, I guess, Google Docs uploaded on my phone, so I try to do that separately, but I could put it in after the fact.
Okay.
That'll work.
All right, so we're discussing what impacts do you think technology has on the hunting experience in Idaho?
It looks like Nicole has her hand up.
I don't think she's in our room.
No, she is.
Oh, she is. Nicole, you got something? You're on mute and no camera. Well, maybe I'll go. I mean, impacts that technology has in Idaho, I think a lot of it really helps. It gets more people into the game. Like Nephi had that wonderful chart, high efficiency to begin with, and then as you progress into the hunting world, you try to make it harder and harder and harder for yourself. I mean, some of this technology, let's just use a Leupold scope. We got a 9-year-old kid on a passport, and he's got a CDS dial, and the dad can range the animal and tell him to turn to 450, turns it, and has a great time. And now we've got that kid hooked for life at hunting. So like I said, I think technology really does help bring more people to the sport than hurt it. But that's just my 2 cents from what I'm taking it. I think Nephi had some great points tonight.
Yeah, I would agree. I think all the presenters made me really think, kind of even coming into it without having a lot of preconceived notions about it. I mean, some things just have inherently made me a little nervous in some of the technologies, and yet, and it was good to hear. I mean, it was good to hear that their perspectives on that, and I like the idea of simplifying. I guess one thing from like a purely social side of things, how does it affect Idaho? And I don't know that we've seen it just yet, but I think our social license, with the non-hunting public is something that always we have to think about. But looking at harvest data and things, it doesn't seem like things are exponentially increasing. We're not, killing a lot more animals because the technology is available, and maybe that's because woodsmanship is getting lost a little bit with a lot of our new folks too. But So yeah, I don't know. It seems to me like right now, maybe it's not having a dramatic impact. Other than, I think definitely recruiting is a big thing.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, as Nathan alluded to, new hunters, especially youth, they're kind of trying to find their niche or what attracts them to it versus just, a family, friend, or relative taking them out. I remember when I was young, just even a mouth read diaphragm call, as they bought at the department store and practice with that. That was pretty cool to me. And that was some new technology way back when that we just laugh at now. But that really draws people into it. And I think that's key. Sometimes the opposite of that, though, there are some technologies that, as I think about through some of my hunting experiences that have kind of turned me off with some of, my fellow hunters in the field that, that's their choice in what they're doing, and not that it's, more of a, I can't think of the word, but it's caused some issues, certain things out there. And my time on the commission, we had as many decisions biologically as we do socially now. And that has really changed. That's why you see a lot of these surveys that are out there to how people, view their experience. And each one of us here, and I'm sure Nicole, she'll add to this in a second, but our experiences are all different and what we want to get out of our hunting. And each year, and as we age, as we go through different phases of our hunting career, that also changes. And what we look at, maybe changing now or enabling now, our views will be different in 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I think unless Nicole, you want to jump in, but even like Nephi, it's everybody's own journey on how they perceive it. But like thermals, I doubt there's anything Fish and Game has for wounded animals or shot animals and not recovered, because people just don't report that. But if they had a handheld thermal, how many more animals are recovered, and then actually we get to utilize that meat that we got instead of just letting it go to waste. I mean, and that's a great thing. I mean, obviously, in our current regs already, 410-C is you cannot attach electronic to a gun already, so you can't put that thermal on the gun, and they're very limited on distance. As I think what's his name, Auburn was saying that it's 100, 200 yards, kind of max distance to be able to see, and it's really more of a recovery aspect than anything that I would think.
Sorry, I was raising my hand earlier because I had lost speaking privileges, so I was just trying to draw attention to myself, and it finally worked out. I agree. I think it was Chelsea had raised an interesting point, though, with the thermal technologies, and today's military grade technology could very easily become consumer grade technology in the not too distant future, which is something that I know that we were tasked with, is kind of keeping an eye on what the trajectory could be, not just what we see right now. So I think that'll be an interesting conversation. And then for me, I'm a prosecuting attorney. Part of my life as a prosecuting attorney. So the regulation side for me is pretty interesting, with how you draw those lines with the verbiage for potentially utilizing thermals to recover. And how do you regulate that? How do you enforce that? Because you could easily just claim that gosh, you thought you had one solid hit in it, and so you're using that to recover. And so there's the enforcement portion of it is an interesting conundrum that I think we also have to face. And I see both sides of it. I shoot PRS and use all of those technologies. I've used thermals, but then I also have had some very unpleasant hunting experiences that have called into question my love for some of those technologies when I'm faced with them out in the field. So it is, I think it's going to be an interesting journey.
I want to say I want to trust at least 99% of the public are there to do right and be honest, just good honest people too. It's that the 1% that's going to break this, they would have broken the rules already.
And see, that's the percent that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, and so I might be a little more jaded, but
Yeah,
fair enough.
Well, and that something I brought up in the last chat group too was something I heard that everyone should define fair chase for them, and to me that is a little bit problematic because I see people that have no qualms with doing things that I consider very unethical. And what in my world, working for the Forest Service, what I see a lot of is regulations being violated, but with technologies in vehicles and trying to, you know, maintain some form of habitat without that change. And that is huge. I mean, that is a huge one that changes fast, and we don't talk as much about it, but people can go to places they never did before. And and then we have to adapt how we manage the landscape to meet that. So, um, whether it's e-bikes or the side-by-sides that were talked about, it does change the complexion of everything we do. So, yeah, I'm not sure that we want to have everyone define what's good and what's wrong. I think as
I
sportsmen, we
agree.
have traditionally had self-imposed limitations, and I think that's something that this group needs to wrestle with.
I think we've all learned in the last 10 years, even politically, that common sense is, it just depends on who's in the room. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to judge, what I think may be ethical and is taking care of my opportunity to hunt, but also providing security and cover to the animal. Nathan may think totally different. He's like, what is that guy thinking, or that gal thinking? So, yeah, it's everybody's journey is a little bit unique. I think in Nephi's presentation, he said that the department basically was to manage numbers, not personal journeys. And I think that bleeds over a little bit back and forth. Um, so yeah, I've just enjoyed the discussion. It's really made me think about where I'm at, how I've evolved, and maybe where I'm going at one point.
Yeah, I think Nephi had that great graph, like he said, high efficiency. I don't know if I talked about this to low, or kind of we all start here, and as we progress as a hunter, we tend to make it harder and harder and harder on ourselves. I mean, I love long range, but I also love the muzzleloader seasons because you got to get close to them. So you get all these. You guys did a great job fishing game of setting these other seasons up so we can hunt traditional, we can hunt kind of general weapon anything. So it's kind of these seasons make it great for you to find your own personal journey in that.
Mhm. Think back to our early conversation in the in-person meeting, and we talked about what we enjoy about hunting in Idaho, and it was almost unanimous that it was the opportunities. And so I think, for me, it was like, well, okay, I can see some of these technologies limiting future opportunities, but right now the data is not showing that at this point. So that to me was kind of eye-opening that maybe it's not having as big an impact as I'm thinking it's having, even though I think there are cases where it does, but across the board, I don't think it's having the impact that my perception was.
Yeah, Derek, I guess you saw that just being with Fishing Game as a commissioner. Did you see, as let's go back 7 years, 10 years, the number of animals being taken, has the percentage gone up with technology of long range and better scope stuff, or has it kind of just stayed about even?
I think it's probably stayed even, maybe a slight uptick, and then you can really parse it out. I know there's certain units in regards to archery where some of those archery success rates they're pushing rifle, because guys have dialed it in and have figured out they've become very efficient, not necessarily because of technology, but just because of time, boots on the ground. And so I think there's probably a slight uptick. There's probably no data that necessarily can show it across the board. But yeah, it's hard to say, and that's the challenge, right? We all want to see data. We want to see some numbers that are saying, in these particular rifle hunts, has success rate of harvest, has it increased, 1, 2, 5% or whatever. So I don't think that that's necessarily there. And then especially, unfortunately, from the reporting mechanism, right? That's unfortunate, but some people are not reporting accurately, and they want to skew the numbers or not be honest about it, and that's unfortunate. But It's hard to say, you know, and the commission's very capable of making decisions. That's why I appreciate this working group, because of the discussion out there with technologies amongst the hunting public. And so hats off to the department and the commission to be able to put this out for a 24-member group to represent, you know, fellow hunters throughout the state, and helping the commission with some recommendations. They're very capable on their own, but it provides different perspective from all around the state with people's different hunting opportunities. And that gives them a more robust information set to be able to make some decisions, if any decisions are made at all.
Right.
Well, if I could just jump in real quick to answer one of the questions that was out there, and that was that, you know, have things changed? Well, of course they've changed. Have people noticed them? Not really, because you look at the number of elk hunts that have become capped. Capping is the first level of reduction from general, and the next level is some controlled thing. You look at the number of general opportunities that have become controlled. You look at the season length that we let people go. I mean, all those things have changed over time. I think they're subtle, but they're because harvest has decreased the buck to doe ratio. It has, you know, decreased the overall number. I mean, you look at you know, the Pioneer Zone. We wanted to reduce elk numbers. We put 2,500 cow tags in there. We did that. Now there's 500 cow tags, and people are wondering, where's my cow tag? But, you know, that's pretty substantial. We cut a lot of tags. So it's messy, but I can tell you that there have been changes over the 20 years that I've worked for this agency, and opportunity has gotten less over time. I can tell you that for sure.
Not to get off subject there, but has that anything to do with wolves?
I'd like to plead the Fifth Amendment and we're not supposed to talk about wolves, Nathan.
Got it.
It's outside of the scope of this group.
Right. Let's see.
So I guess as far as some takeaways and be able to provide something for the Word document or whatever, I've written down a couple things. Technology helps recruitment of new hunters, especially youth, which we were talking about early on. Each hunter's journey is different. Is there anything else that we should add from this discussion?
I mean, we can say that technology does have a negative impact too if we go too far, but I don't know what that line is. I mean, obviously, like we said, drones with thermal imaging, but drones are already banned and to hunt with, you know. So
I guess as I'm thinking about that, as I ask that question, just going to Toby's comments, that technology, I mean, opportunity has changed somewhat, as he alluded to, cap zones, a little bit less general seasons, more controlled hunt abstract. So opportunity is changing somewhat and has over time.
yeah, and I think like you said, technology and it may not even just be on the rifle. We're talking about e-scouting, Google Maps, Onyx, the internet, how far I can push. I mean, I think there's probably more hunters I talk to now that are pushing further and deeper than they ever have. You know, you got their favorite YouTubers and are watching them going, yeah, you know, I don't need my side by side. Let me get 7 miles off the trail. And then our equipment is better to be in 20-degree weather that I can pack in a garly tent. I don't have to say it right. That's only 16 ounces, you know, I mean, and that's more technology for us to be able to stay further and longer and deeper and stay warmer and hydrate. Things we're not thinking of there, which is great because I think I'm kind of a gear geek, so I love that stuff too.
Nicole, anything else to add?
I think we've covered it. I think the one thing that you pointed out, I believe is pretty key is managing the population, not necessarily the individual. I don't remember if it was experience or journey, but really gearing this towards the population. And I think what Toby pointed out, what we've been talking about is it is something to keep in mind, that we have been limiting those opportunities because of the advancements, and like Nathan was talking about, and there's a lot of those technologies, but we do have to keep in mind that that has had an impact, and we have been limiting because of that.
Just a heads up, they're gonna all show up in about 30 seconds. So
Okay. Thank you.
you're
Thanks, guys.
welcome. Didn't mean to cut things off.
I think we were wrapping up.
Okay. Oh, I was wrong. They have another minute. Sorry. Thanks, Derek, for taking notes.
I'll have to get it added. I tried to do it on my phone separately, but I didn't have Google Sheets, so it wouldn't let.
Yeah. We're pulling out all the stops on technology, aren't we?
Good. It helps us learn. It stretches us.
Different kind of technology, but meeting technology.
Maybe this is my first Zoom call ever.
That's awesome.
How do you do that, man? That's great.
Right.
I wish I could say that.
True.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, here everybody comes. Welcome back. Thank you for playing with our meeting technology. Not hunting technology, but meeting technology. Just gonna take a few minutes to see if you have anything that you'd like to share that's top of mind about the conversations that you were in, the last two conversations. We don't have as much time as I would have hoped, but does anybody have anything really big they want to say out loud? Hal's microphone is open, so's Kevin's.
this is Ken, I would just add that the more I'm learning, the more I realize what a challenge we signed up for.
Yeah.
So,
Jeremiah?
Yes, ma'am. Did we happen to get any of the data from the previous meeting about the restrictions of technology from some of the surrounding states? Have we received any of that?
Yes, sir, you did. You, in an email from me, you received links to the regs for all of our surrounding states, and I have listed out the pages in which those kind of summarized restrictions exist in those regs.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I feel like today went pretty well. I learned a lot today. Watching all of this stuff from all the presenters. These different groups that we just broke out into is interesting to listen to their sides of things that are going through it. And I feel like we can all agree that we do need to keep it simple and be very cautious on what we do moving forward. And we got a pretty big task ahead of us on how that's going to happen moving forward. I mean, ultimately, we're not the ones making the decision, but we will be making a recommendation at the end of this. So it's definitely interesting to keep an open mind and listen to everybody's side.
Anything else anyone wants to say?
Well, I just think these small groups are productive because it seems like smaller the groups, we're more willing to speak our minds. So hopefully that's part of the plan going forward is continue these Or maybe as we get to know one another, we'll work better as a larger group too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's pretty cool to get in those little groups and do have a big task ahead of us. And I think, you know, a lot more appreciation to Fish and Game for, you know, the biologists, knowing how many animals we have out there, the season dates, the things that they go through, because sometimes we take advantage of those, looking at those different factors.
Okay, well, the next thing I wanted to do is ask if there are any questions or technologies that you still want to know more about. And if you would like to just think about that and send an email to Ellery and I, we will try to plan additional presentations as appropriate for future meetings. So invite those suggestions.
It seems like your thermals and your cell phones are your hot topics. At least from the groups breaking out, that seems to be where everybody tends to take the conversations.
And are there follow-up questions you want to ask about those technologies?
Sorry, Wendy, just a point of clarification. Jason, did you say cell phones or cell camera, like cell?
The cell phone camera, the cameras that send the pictures to your
Okay.
cell.
Yep, the transmitting trail cameras.
Yeah, those ones, it seems like when we break into the groups that those are the two hot topics that come up. And I think I don't have I mean, listening to everybody talk about thermals, I don't have a real good understanding yet on what I would want to recommend. I do know that it is legal to hunt with them, to hunt wolves in Idaho, and our wolf season and our elk and deer seasons run simultaneously. So how they're gonna work that out and be able to be able to enforce that's gonna be an issue for Fish and Game in itself right there, you know, and being able to use that thermal imagery to go in and actually find animals. I've heard people talk about that. I think that's a great idea too. How are they gonna enforce it? I don't know, but I feel like there's a lot of conversation that's happening around the thermals. I've heard it from the public here in Bonner County that have sent me a lot of information. I think that's gonna be one of the big hot topics, that and those cameras that send the text right to your phone.
Thank you. Nathan?
Yeah, I think I mean, education seems to be a big part of the group right now, is just learning this. I would love to hear from a long range expert. You know, the YouTube and the internet makes looking like shooting 1,000 yards is real easy on an animal, and there's quite a bit more to it. And maybe just another 15-minute thing on education on what it takes to be able to shoot those distances. You know, and it's not as easy as it looks.
I would second that. I have some friends that do that, and it's as much art and science as it is a practice of just shooting at a target. And so I think a good, healthy description or an education on that would be helpful.
I believe it's Larry Hatter. You're listed as Jessica, but if you want to open your mic and say anything.
Can you hear me? I've been having some troubles today on my.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for everything today. You guys all been great, just like the last time. Definitely, I'm hearing a lot of thermal technology murmuring, the drones, but there is discussion. I mean, a lot of people are talking under their breath a little because I think they're scared about the long range stuff, of which I'm not against, but also I think we need some thought on it. Maybe get some creativity, to address some of those concerns as well. So I'm wide open to those possibilities going forward. Another thing I'd like to throw out there is potentially using technology for good to help the game in the state. And I think that the department especially could use some technology to increase game health in the state, and specifically, I think we could use like in our harvest reports are fairly rudimentary, and I think we could use technology just like a picture from your cell phone when you harvest an animal, you send that in with your report and gives the department a better idea of what was harvested. I think there's good ways to use technology in the future, and I would like to open that discussion at some point.
Thank you. Jeff.
Yeah, Larry hit on it just a little bit, but I'd like to see something on the drones. It seems like just a little bit that we've seen, it looks like it's an area that potentially could really be abused. And I'm not real familiar with all the capabilities that they have, and what maybe even the FAA, what their rules are with regard to drones nowadays. I mean, what other agencies are controlling these drones, and that if understanding that, to know how much the Fish and Game needs to be involved. Maybe these individuals are violating federal law with some of the things that they're doing with these drones. I don't know, but it would be nice to know what kind of technology they have available. I mean, I've seen some of these things on YouTube where it looks like they have thermal cameras on them as well. And so it'd just be nice to know what the cutting edge technology is with regard to drones.
Dylan.
Yeah, one thing that I heard mentioned a couple times in the breakouts was a good idea, and I'd kind of elaborate on is so some of the things with thermals and cell cams is how to come up with language that doesn't pigeonhole things that everybody thinks it's reasonable for, but then also has restrictions in place. Would it be some way that we could have a CO or somebody give a short presentation on their interaction with these technologies, because a lot of these technologies are addressed in some way in the regulations right now, and what their interactions have been with hunters in the field and how they handle these situations currently, and if they have issues with the way that the regulations are written, in that they're written in a way where they basically can't do anything. That could be helpful for us, because I mean, if it's already vague or too broad or whatever, that could help assist us on both of those well, more of the thermals. I guess I don't because there's no regulations on cell cams, I don't think right now, but I don't know, that could be maybe helpful. I heard that brought up a couple times, that maybe everyone's got some issues with how we're going to come up with language, and maybe hearing from the people that are going to actually be enforcing this stuff on how they are currently handling those things in the field, that could be helpful.
Okay. We need to keep it really tight because we're going to run out of time here. Doug?
I just was going to say, I don't know the best way to say this, but maybe if we're the ones giving recommendations on this, that maybe on a homework assignment, we should familiarize ourselves with the different technologies, what's out there, how the other states have already treated them, some of their language on how they've regulated them. If we have X amount of meetings, and if we spend 4 of them just familiarizing ourselves with the technology, we're never going to get anything done. I'm, like all this information on what they are and how you do it is, and how the other states have already in the West have already addressed some of these things, is really out there and super easy to find. So, maybe just for purposes of our meetings, maybe we can do some of that on our own if we don't really know what it would do. I mean,
We'll try to pull some documents together that would help educate you, so we don't have to use this special space.
Not to use the meeting time just to speed things up. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Matt.
Well, just real quick, I think a lot of these things we're bringing up, several of them are already illegal. Drones, there's several things there that I think they just need. I mean, we can bring in a CO, but some of these, we just need to re-clarify the wording. So legally, so they are enforceable. So in the field, if someone's flying a drone, they chase the elk, they're obviously trying to kill them, then it's like flying out of an aircraft on the same day. So we just got to fix that verbiage there. And I think there's several of them in that respect that just need the verbiage fixed. And some of them can be fixed with educational video from Fish and Game on their site teaching ethics.
Okay, we're going to stop now. If you have additional requests for presentations or additional materials, send an email to Ellery and I, and we'll do what we can. This is just a reminder about upcoming meetings. The next meeting will be December 2nd, and it will also be an online meeting like we've had tonight. I want you to make note of the last meeting. We now have the commission schedule, and they're meeting on the 24th and 25th of March. So we had to move the date of the final meeting forward 1 week in order to help you finish your work before they meet. So make note of that. I'm interested in feedback on how the meeting went tonight, things that you think went well, and opportunities for improvement. I know Ellery and I have got a long list of things we've learned tonight. So if you have suggestions for improvement, we'd love to have those. In terms of next steps, like we did the last time, I will be preparing a group memory for your use. In order to do that as completely as possible, I need you to put your notes in the Google files so that they can be included in the group memory. Consider it a gift to yourself and your colleagues to put some thoughts in there, because it'll be really hard when we get around to March to remember the conversations we had tonight. So recording what your conclusions were is going to be really important. And so we need you to help us with that. Ellery, you made note of a few other next steps.
Yes, so I have next steps to obviously share the presentations from our presenters today with the group, as well as the ATA or the Archery Trade Association summary document that was referenced. We'll share that with the group. I'm going to work with Mr. Zinno on the multi-state grant project that compares fish and game regs across the nation, and particularly firearms, that I will be able to share with the group once I get it from John. And then we have some additional requests related to more information on thermals, transmitting trail cameras, drones, and a request for some data from a request and a presentation from a long range expert. And everyone should already have links to all of the neighboring states' regs and references to pages for their technology restrictions. And a request for a CO to come talk about how this stuff actually works in the field.
Thank you. We are at time. Next meeting, we'll be talking about fair chase ethic. And on this slide right here, you have the presenters that will be sharing their knowledge with you. Thank you very much. I think it was an interesting experiment, wasn't it? So I'm looking forward to hearing feedback on how you think things went and how we can improve it for future meetings. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Thanks.